first of all, very nice to be here. Hope everybody had a good lunch and is ready to delve back into it. So my presentation today will be about the operational benefits of using ventilation modeling in mines. And some of these might be pretty obvious to most of you, but hopefully I'll catch some that you haven't thought about before and you can include in your ventilation modeling and get benefit of. So to me, like the main thing that Ventsim helps us do is just create a digital twin of like our ventilation system underground. So we can use that to, assess things that we can't do underground. It's just a digital way of optimizing the ventilation system and seeing how it can work and also troubleshooting issues. So I won't, there's obviously a lot of benefits in using Ventsim, and I'll just cover a few, but there's a lot more. And the disclaimer is that, with ventilation modeling, it's garbage in equals garbage out. So we just need to make sure that when we're using the Ventsim or any ventilation model, that we're giving it good parameters and calibrating the models to make sure that we're getting information back that makes sense. So the first point I wanted to touch on was using Ventsim or as a visual tool. It's very powerful, especially when we're communicating with our teams. Oh, thank you. It's very powerful, especially when we're communicating with our teams, because we can show them how the ventilation model works. We come across a lot of mining engineers which are very proficient in mining, but they sometimes don't have a clue about what ventilation is. So just showing them with colors, so okay, this is an exhaust, this is an intake, it's very helpful, right? And you can tell them why you need a raise, because a lot of times they're like, why do you need a raise? So it's very helpful for us to communicate. Also, as well, with the interfaces that there is with DESIGN, we can get information from DESIGN into Ventsim. And these are things like rock age, the airway size, the density of the rock, especially if we have a deep mine, right? Like all these things affect the ventilation modeling, and having these things and put it into our ventilation models can help us make the ventilation model smarter. And it's not just, this is what the ventilation model is. You can interrogate it and look at, what different attributes the mine design and the ventilation model has. Secondly, what I wanted to touch on was just making sure that we have a fan database built into our ventilation model. This helps us, in a pinch, we have a fan that went down and now we've got a few other fans that we can use. So it's a good tool that we can use as long as we build the database in Ventsim, and you can select another fan that will provide the same operating points. And as you can see here in the picture, like this was a quick selection of a fan based on an operating point, and it will give you, right, like how closely does it match different types of fans. So you can select, and sometimes, you might need to install two fans or two fans in series to like make it the same duty of the one fan, but it's a good tool because you can look at what fans you have and utilize them. And especially when you're in an operational mine, you shouldn't be using fixed flow because it can mess up your ventilation system. So making sure that you have a fan curve that's off an actual fan is very important. My next benefit is looking at recirculation, especially when we have a big mine that keeps on extending and advancing and changing. It's easy to forget about recirculation, but recirculation and in Ventsim there's a tool which doesn't take that long to run, but once you run it, you can see areas of the mine which are recirculating, and in some cases, it might be just because of how Ventsim models it. Like, for example, if you have a fan as a booster fan in series, it's going to show up as a recirculation. but you know that the air is being picked up from the previous duct to the next fan, and it's just pushing it along the heading. But when you run it in Ventsim, it'll show it as recirculation. And sometimes you can see that because the mine has a new breakthrough, or you change things in the ventilation model, you have recirculation in the mine. So I think just using Ventsim to, especially as you're extending, because most of the time it's obvious, right? Like you can see the arrows and you have recirculation, but I think using this tool is very helpful, especially when you're expanding. My next one is regarding blast modeling. And Daryl touched a little bit on blast modeling, and that you need to make sure that it's well calibrated to be an effective tool. But the benefit of doing blast modeling as well is to evaluate different techniques or ventilation methods to clear the fumes quicker. Obviously, if it's not calibrated properly, the timing is not going to be right. But at least, if you're looking at different methods, it's still going to give you the same result, that this method is going to be quicker than the other one. The time just might not be the right time if it's not calibrated properly. But it's definitely a good tool to assess like how long it's going to take you and what you can do to make it better. And following on that, it can help troubleshoot too. Like a lot of times, I'm sure you guys, or a lot of you guys have gotten a call where it says, this area should have cleared and we still have blast gases underground, but everything is how it should be. And usually the reason for that is that a fan is off or there's a connection somewhere that shouldn't be. So using Ventsim, at least it can help, you can help ask some questions of, okay, do you have blast gases in this location, in this location? And it can help you pinpoint where the issues are. And sometimes it takes a little bit of back and forth and measurements so that you can exactly pinpoint where the problem is, but at least it will help you come up with a hypothesis of why we're having problems clearing the blast. And looking at the model and taking some measurements underground, we can figure out, okay, there's an opening in this area that shouldn't have been. So now we can go back and forth and see what, why we're having issues by using Ventsim. Next one is troubleshooting blockages in the ventilation system, and this sometimes takes a while to build up. So at the mine that I was doing some work for, they didn't notice it initially, but essentially what happened is that they had a blockage in one of the vent races. They didn't have access to the area, but because of ground fall in that area, the pressures were increasing. And the only thing that they knew is that they weren't getting as much air as they should have been, because obviously the pressure in the system was a lot higher, so the flow reduced. And then what we did, we just worked backwards to try and see where the resistance was higher than it should have been to identify where the blockage was, and then they could do more inspections in the area that was an issue. What ended up happening in this instance is they couldn't go and clear the blockage, so they had to drive another race. But using Ventsim is a good tool to identify where it's not matching up as long as it's calibrated, so that you can, address the issue. The next point that operationally the mines can use Ventsim is for fire simulation modeling. These days, a lot of mines are looking at the different sources of fuel on the mine and just having records of them because they want to mitigate the risk. At the same time, if you have these sources of fuels, you've got the quantity, what type of materials they are, and it can help with the fire simulation modeling. When you do the risk assessment, you should preemptively be able to do fire simulation in areas where, for example, a workshop is an area where there's a lot of combustible sources. So that's a good area to already have a plan in the mine. So if something happens, you know how to address it. But sometimes, you know, you've got a truck that catches fire in a location of the mine, and you can't model every single instance of when this happens. But at least if you've got the presets already set up in Ventsim, if that happens, you can model it. And a lot of times, like the fire rescue team will come to the ventilation team and ask them like what areas have been affected by this fire, because they don't want to put people into an area that's potentially dangerous. It doesn't mean that they're not going to take precautions when they're going in, but at least they're not going in blind, and they know what condition they should be encountering when they go in. And even like when there's a fire, the fire inspector or investigator will ask these questions so that they, you know, so that they know what the severity of the fire and which areas were affected. Then my last operational benefit is the seasonal changes, and this is especially very important for deep mines or mines that rely on natural ventilation pressure to ventilate them. And recently we had a mine that we were working on, and they were seeing the flow reversing in one of the tunnels because it was getting cold. And, you know, like to satisfy with regulatory requirements, you should know which way your direction, the airflow is going. And that's especially important, especially for emergency planning, because if you don't know which way the air is going, it creates issues. So in Ventsim, there's settings to set up the temperature of the ventilation model, and as long as it's well calibrated, you can see what changes you could have seasonally, if it's cold air or if it's hot air. And as well, if, for example, I don't know, you can encounter hot water underground, and now it's changing how much heat you have in your underground system. So to me, that was a good thing to see. And, you know, now we have information so that we know that, look, at this temperature or below these temperatures, we can have reversal in this area of the mine. So it's something that we can keep tabs on and have a plan to mitigate. So those were just a few of the operational benefits that I have seen as I've been working through things. But if you guys have any questions about those specific ones or any other, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions? I think everyone is a bit sleepy after lunch by the look of things.
Sounds good. Okay.
No question? Here.
Just a general question, like a lot of interesting applications there, but what's on your wish list for Ventsim?
For Ventsim?
What's not working well enough?
Trying to think. Well, what I would wish is that you just take the DESIGN model and automatically the vent model gets created. That would be the wish. I think the one thing that I struggle with a little bit of times is like when you're staging the different stages in Ventsim, and you know you update one in one stage. I know you can lock it, but like sometimes you need to lock it and sometimes you don't. And if you forget to do that, then you have to go back and fix things. So in a way, it would be good if Ventsim knows what you're trying to do.
That's a fair point, I guess. Now, we are aware of, I guess, some issues sometimes with the stages and some difficulties in using them at time. So yeah, we are always thinking about better ways of doing it. So thanks for the feedback and the question, by the way. Very good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Kim. And